started.
Okay, we're starting now. For all those that are listening, just gonna. Before we continue, I just wanted to speak more about last week's discussion about flying on Sunday out from a time zone that's Sunday into, and when you're going to cross the date, when you go into Shabbos. And last week I mentioned that the problem that the people tell you is Einik Shabbos. There's halacha that if you travel on a ship before Shabbos, so if you're going in the sea, we're going to get seasick and everything, so you have a problem that you're not going to have on Shabbos, you won't have Einik Shabbos, so therefore you shouldn't take the trip unless you need to do it for a mitzvah. And we learned last week that even to meet friends is also considered a mitzvah in this the Gabi this din. But there's one problem is you have to make up with the guy to stop on Shabbos, which obviously is not shaykh by a plane. However, b'shas chak you don't have to worry about it as well. But as I looked more into it, be'emes, there's 2 points I want to make. First of all, the Rebbe in the Mesicha that I mentioned, the Chelek Chav Ches, famous Mesicha on Gimel Tammuz, and Mesiras Nefesh of the Fidik Rebbe, not to travel on Shabbos. When he went to Kastrama, they were going to let him out on Thursday, and he would have had to have been on the train on Shabbos. So the Rebbe is mitzayin to the famous Chassam Sofer. The Chassam Sofer speaks what's exactly the problem of traveling on a train on Shabbos. So different problems that could be. One problem is the problem of going past the Tchum Shabbos. You're going past 2,000 Amos or even 12 mil, which is a bigger share, which is Asim and Atera. But the Rebbe explained that according to the Alter Rebbe, that a train that's constantly moving and doesn't make any stops, so based on a number of different Nekudas, it would come out that according to the Alter Rebbe, it wouldn't be Aser. It would only be Aser if it would stop. If at some point in Shabbos it would stop, it would be a problem of going beyond the Tchum Shabbos. But as long as during the whole time it's constantly moving, it's not a problem according to the Alter Rebbe. Obviously a plane is a train, sometimes makes a stop, but a plane, if you're flying straight through Shabbos, and in the context of what we're speaking about, they're going to fly on a Sunday and going to be for a little bit of time as they cross the daylight until it becomes night, they'll be going through Shabbos. Obviously it's not stopping at all, so there's no problem of passing a Tchum Shabbos. The Rebbe finishes off. The Rebbe says, "But lahalacha karosru achreinim, the achreinim clearly right. You don't go on a train." The Rebbe does not ma'arich in it. What is the main reason that the Chassam Sofer gives over there? The Chassam Sofer brings down a idea which is brought on in halacha, but the Chassam Sofer brings out that according to the Ramban, it could even be a deiraisa. The thing is that the Torah says there's two things. There's the fact you don't work on Shabbos. You have to be careful not to do the mulachas. But then there's also the point of Shabbos is to rest. Shabbos is a day of rest. So therefore, when the Alter Rebbe also brings down this concept in the laws of Muktzah that, Shabbos, the Torah forbids us to do 39 malachas, but technically doing business and cleaning up your house and clearing your storage houses and all these things are not asur mitzad the malachas of Shabbos. So a person technically could spend the whole Shabbos, he's not planting, he's not sowing, he's not building, he's not doing anything, but he'll be cleaning up his storage, he'll be cleaning up his front yard, whatever it is. Or he'll be doing business, whatever it might be. So therefore, one of the reasons for Muktzah, one of the reasons why the Chachamim Masad Muktzah is because a person will be able to move whatever he wants, will just sit, cleaning up his house, and he won't be doing a mulacha, but he will going against the purpose of Shabbos, which is a day of rest. And the Ramban extends the concept further. The way that Rebbe puts it is mashma that this is only a drabonon. The fact that you have to rest on Shabbos in the context of besides not doing malachas, but not moving objects like muks and things like that is only a drabonon. The Ramban extends the concept a bit more, and he says that let's say doing business and all these things, if you only would look at the actual malachas that the Torah prohibits, which are the 39 malachas of the Mishkan, you'd be able to have business, you'd be able to have people, have a marketplace, as long as you're not carrying from Rishus HaYachad to Rishus HaRabim, whatever it is. So mainly he learns that when the Torah is telling you Shabbosing to rest, the Torah is trying to underline that you have to actually push it. It's not just enough, you don't do any malachas, you have to rest. So he holds that this idea of resting and not just not doing work, but being in a state of rest and not being involved in day-to-day activities is a deraisa. Lahaloch, it's schwer to take on as a deraisa. I mean, that Rebbe, you have this concept of uvd in the choil, and by muktzah, that you don't want it, that we asked you to move things, so you shouldn't just come to move things around and you won't rest. But nevertheless, the Chasam Sofer just brings on to Ramban to underline that according to the Ramban, it's not just the Rabbanon, but it's a deraisa. But anyway, so the Chasam Sofer says like this. The Chasam Sofer says, he says like this. He says there's halacha that on Shabbos a person is not allowed to walk to the end of the Tchum Shabbos in order to wait until it gets dark to walk further, unless he's going in order, let's say, achnasas kala, let's say, chameis, in order to help bring things for a chasna, for a levaya, whatever it might be. So then he's allowed to walk on Shabbos. He's allowed to go in the afternoon and allowed to take a walk and walk right up until the end of the Tchum Shabbos. And then obviously he can't walk further than the Tchum Shabbos for this mitzvah. That much he's not allowed to do. But what we're allowing him to walk on Shabbos, even though it's clearly recognizable that he's walking on Shabbos for the sake of right after Shabbos being able to continue walking further, we allow him to do it because of l'tzerich mitzvah. So, but however, if he wants to walk towards the end of the Tchum, for the end of the Tchum, in order to be able to do business, to go meet a business partner at the other end, at the other city, he's not allowed to do it on Shabbos because it falls under the problem of Mimsei Cheftzcha. On Shabbos, it should be a day of rest. You shouldn't look to try to, get your business deals taken care of, etc. So the Chasam Sofer says, so why is a person allowed to travel on a boat on Shabbos? We've learned that if you don't have the problem of Einik Shabbos, whatever it is, he's allowed to travel. The whole day of Shabbos, he's constantly traveling in order to get business done or to meet people. If he's not allowed to walk on Shabbos until the end of the Tchum, because it's recognizable that he's doing it in order to do something that's not a mitzvah after Shabbos, so why is he allowed to spend the whole day of Shabbos traveling? So therefore the Chasam Sofer says that if a person is in a boat, so true, there could be a problem of Einik Shabbos, there's turbulence in the sea, whatever it is. But if he's in a boat, he has his own cabin, he has his own dal damas. If he wants, he could eat, he could sleep, he could keep Shabbos more or less the way he's able to do in his house. So Taka, he is in a mode, he's in a boat that's moving, but he on his own, in his body, you don't recognize that he's doing something clearly in order to prepare himself for something for after Shabbos, so the business, whatever it is that he'll do at the destination that the boat will get him to. So therefore the Chasam Sofer says, he says that in a train a person can't sit. I mean, I think in Europe trains did have their own cabins, but at least the trains Chasam Sofer was talking about, he says the trains you didn't have your own place. You were sitting there. You had to stay in your seat. So then he says in such a thing you're violating the concept of Shabbosim. You're violating the concept of resting because you can't pravi your Shabbos. We usually pravi your Shabbos. You're sitting in the train. You can't really eat and enjoy the Shabbos the way you usually want to enjoy it. So therefore, in such a case, the Chasam Sofer holds that you're going against the concept of resting on Shabbos, because when you don't have your own dal damas, you can't spend Shabbos the way you would regularly do. And the reason why you're traveling, you're putting yourself in this position, is because you just want to meet somebody, want to do business, whatever it is. So he holds, according to the Ramban, it could be a deraisa, but upon him, al pi halacha, you would definitely be doing the problem of mimsei cheftzcha, of trying to do something, prepare yourself to do something for after Shabbos. Why? Because he makes this difference between a boat where you had your own cabin, you're able to spend Shabbos where you want, when in a train you don't have your own dal damas, so Mela, your gufa, your body is tied down. You can't praver Shabbos. So there it's keilu in a certain context, as if you're like walking on Shabbos, and you're going and walking in order to prepare yourself to do something for after Shabbos, which is also under the problem of Mimtzei Cheftzcha. So that's more or less what the other Achrayim give a few diukim ahead, but more or less it seems that the accepted understanding of why traveling on a train on Shabbos, if you're not going to have the problem of Tchum Shabbos, and you're not going on it on Shabbos, you're just going to be on it before Shabbos and going to leave after Shabbos, just during Shabbos will be on the train. So the only problem that will be to be on a moving train on Shabbos would probably be, at least lahaloch, probably a drabonon of resting, of not being involved in furthering in your goals and getting to your destinations, which you don't need for Shabbos. So therefore, he says that's the reason why he says b'poel mamish riding on a train, moving train on Shabbos would be awesome. L'chayra oibazoi poskim right. The same thing would be being on a plane. Adrab, so on a plane you're more tied down, and you know on the train at least you can move around. In the plane when it takes off and it lands, you have to have your seatbelt on. When there's turbulence, you're more tied down. So mitzad echad, so it's not just oinik Shabbos. The problem with flying into a Shabbos wouldn't just be a problem of oinik Shabbos, which could be waived under, you know, for the Seirach Mitzvah or B'Shas Chak. You don't even have to worry about the fact that the goy, it's not even shak that the goy will stop during Shabbos to travel. But l'chayri, you're going according to this, you're pashat going, it's isra of mimtzei chavtzcha, at least isra d'rabbonon lahalacha. But the other hand, from the other side, there's a whole, I mean, in this particular case of somebody that's flying from a time zone which is already Sunday and he's flying into Shabbos, l'chayri, you can look at it the whole other way around also, because such a person, who says for him when he's flying into Shabbos, who says for him it's Shabbos? He said last week, the Rebbe brings down that somebody that's traveling in a boat that crosses the date line, so until he reaches a Mokim Yishuv, until he reaches a destination, there's no clear, defined, you can't say that which type of day, which day he's supposed to be counting right now. So a person that's in the ear, he's flying, he left Sunday, he left from Australia, now by him he's flying across the date line. Until he lands anywhere, and particularly, and he becomes part of that place that he lands, who says for him it's Shabbos B'chlam? You have, I mean, whatever the shmuz and how reliable they are, but you have, I think there's a mindset that they bring down in Yeh HaMelech. There's once a bocher that had a Yom Huledes, and one of the shluchim was going to Australia, he had a Yom Huledes, but he was flying on his Yom Huledes, so he would lose his Yom Huledes when he would cross the date line. So something like that. The Rebbe said that until he lands, he still has his Yom Huledes. I think some people, I don't know if it's based on this or other things. Let's say somebody is flying on Rish Chodesh and he's crossing the date line Rish Chodesh by night. So those that want to say that if you don't land yet in Australia, even though in Australia it's already it's not Rish Chodesh, it's the day after. But since you didn't land yet, you could daven early in the morning before you land. You could daven Rish Chodesh davening, because from where you took off, you still didn't change your thing. I mean, there's a famous story people probably heard that when my Bubba went to Australia, so there they crossed the date line on Shabbos. That was part of the problem. The other thing was that if they were to keep their cheshbon from the way they were back in America, would come out, they would have to disembark the ship in Sydney on Shabbos. So the whole shiloh what to do. Whatever, the Rebbe officially, the way the story goes, the Rebbe told Leibel to ask different Rabbonim. And one that Rav said that what they should do is that when before it was going to make its destination on Sydney, which would be according to their old count on a Shabbos, it was going to stop on Fiji a few days before, whatever it is. So this Rav said when they come to Fiji, wherever it is, I forget which, maybe it's a different island, they should get off, they should eat something. A matoi, it would be even better if they would sleep over there, take a nap. It's like this, they become part of the kviyas of the zman, of the time zone of the place that they're stopping over at. So in order that when this ship would arrive in Sydney, for them already be Sunday, and they shouldn't have a problem, that it should still be considered Shabbos based on their old count. So when the ship makes a stop a few days before, they should get off. I mean, whatever. They should go in and eat something and whatever. And they should make some type of whatever you want to call it, a chazaka, shvisa, whatever it is, that to give them, that they should, become part of that mokim of whatever that place for them is already the day over after the dateline. They should become part of that time zone. So l'chayda the Rebbe liked what this Rav said, and that's what Itaka sent. He sent back that that's what they should do. L'chayda, according to this, comes out that if a person for him he already had Shabbos and he's crossing now. For him it's Sunday. He's crossing now into times on the Shabbos. The shayla is b'chala for him. The whole thing for him is l'chayda. I don't know if it's a suffix, but whatever it is, the situation is definitely unclear. Is it for him really Shabbos? So if it's only Yisra, the whole problem of flying over at the time, if it would be Shabbos, the whole problem with him being on the plane would be Yisra b'msoi chefzecha, which is a derabbanon. whatever it is. So then l'choira yesh. I'm not a rav, but I'm just saying for those for information purposes. L'choira yesh makom loymar that if it's only Yisud Rabbanon, to have a Safik Rabban Malach. If it's on at most what you if you would be doing a Malacha, then during that time that you're flying over l'choira zicher, everybody would agree you shouldn't actually do Malacha Menatera. Or maybe you should even not try not to do any Malachas Rabban and not move Muktzah. But the fact that you're being on the plane, according to Chassam Sefer, is a problem of Mitzvah Cheftzcha. But if we Mitzvah Cheftzcha, we pass him is only the Rabbanon l'choira. So if you're on the plane and you're and the only problem is of Mitzvah Cheftzcha, and for you the whole thing is a suffix to begin with, whether it's for you Shabbos B'chlal. So Ula Yishleim is a suffix to Rabbanon. What's he going to say? The Mitzvah Cheftzcha is the Kabbalah, it's stronger than the Rabbanon. I don't know the halamas of it. But I'm just saying that there's different ways to look at it. I remember when I first had the Shaila, so my Zayda showed me there's a Piskei Tshuva, not the Piskei Tshuva that we have today, but before the war in Poland was a Sefer Piskei Tshuva that was printed. So there in Siman Beis, you have a letter from the Gerer Rebbe that he writes that somebody already had the Yom Kippur and he crosses the date line, and he ate on the other side of the date line, which there's Yom Kippur, but he already had his Yom Kippur. Or if somebody, let's say for him, he already had finished Pesach, he crosses the date line into a time zone that's still Pesach and eats chametz. So he says you're not chayiv kares because the person already kept Yom Kippur. The person already kept 7-8 days of Pesach. So for him, if the fact that he's eating chametz or that he's crossing or he's eating on the Yom Kippur, you can't say he's chayiv. I mean, he already kept the Yom Kippur. He fulfilled the Torah's chiyuv. But Poel Mamish, every Rav you'll speak to will tell you that if you actually cross the date line and you reach a Mokim Yishuv and you reach a place that there it's Yom Kippur, there is Pesach, you're not allowed to eat chametz. It's not allowed to eat if it's Yom Kippur. Whether you chayiv kares or not, fine. I mean, the Gerer Rebbe is more speaking whether you could say that Mamish or Eved Isum and Atera to the extent you chayiv kares. But everybody will hold that if you reach a Mokim Yishuv, if you cross the date and you reach the place that's still Pesach, don't eat chametz. Don't eat if it's Yom Kippur. But nevertheless, if you didn't yet reach a Makom Yishuv, you're in the ear, so it's a Shaila B'chala for you, how we should look at it, if it's Shabbos or not. So if the whole problem is on Mitzvah Cheftzcha, so then maybe if it's a suffix, looking at, if it's a suffix B'chala for you, it's Shabbos or not, Ula Yeshleimer that there's a Makom Lahakum. But again, just giving the different aspects over here, Lagabe, this thing that we spoke about last week. Today, I want to continue a little bit further in Siman Tes, where the Alter Rebbe speaks about the halachas of making a meal, a big meal, a small meal on Erev Shabbos. So the Alter Rebbe says in Sif Hey, the Alter Rebbe says that on Erev Shabbos to make a big party that you don't have during the weekdays, so you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. If it's not Erev Shabbos. Not allowed to do Erev Shabbos unless it's a Sudas Mitzvah, as we'll see in a minute. But a Sudas or a Shus, Tam, a party, even if you're doing it in the morning, doing it, a long time before Shabbos comes in, nevertheless, the Alter Rebbe says it's Asr. Why? The Alter Rebbe says, Mitzad Kavod Shabbos, Mitzad the honor of Shabbos. If you're going to eat and fill up your stomach in the morning, so then, more than you usually eat on a regular weekday, so you won't be able to have the Shabbos meal at night properly. So here the Alter Rebbe writes that in such a later we'll learn that even a regular meal it's best not to have from a certain point on in the day. But that Alter Rebbe doesn't say it's asr. Here to have a big meal, big su'ud that they don't usually have during the weekday, the Alter Rebbe says it's asr to have on Friday, even if it's early in the morning, and because it's a problem that you won't have the meal by night properly. The Rebbe continues in Sivav, the Rebbe says that obviously this is only Sudas Harishus, but a Sudas Mitzvah. Let's say your baby had a bris Friday morning. So you can't push it off for another day. And he says, what's examples of things that have to that are Sudas Mitzvah, that there's manas on that day? He says a bris. He says even a bris that the bris was pushed off, but nevertheless, even if, let's say, Chvetz is a few weeks after the bris, but even though you could say that the Zman for the bris was passed, nevertheless, since you have a chiyuv not to keep him an extra day without a bris, so it's considered as if today it's also, the Zman is today, the Zman is on Friday. he says the Sudas Edison Vinisuin. Today we have it all together, a chasana, but those days, in these times of the Gemara, they would have a Suda during the Kiddushin and then a Suda after the Chuppah. So Sudas Edison you shouldn't push off because maybe Shem Yikadmenu Acher, maybe somebody else will take her. Nisuin you also shouldn't push off because Mitzvah Pri Reviyah. So these things are considered a Sudas Mitzvah. And he says, by night, you might not be able to have a proper Suda Shabbos because you'll be stuffed. So the Alter Rebbe says, you can't. Tomorrow, by the mitzvah is on Shabbos to have 3 meals. If you can't usually have 1 meal by night and 2 meals by day. If you can't have 1 meal by night, but you could say that you'll have all 3 meals by day. So fine. So the Alter Rebbe says, however, nevertheless, it's a mitzvah in Siv Zayin. The Alter Rebbe says it's a mitzvah to start the meal. The Alter Rebbe Pika Medagan says to start, doesn't say to finish. But anyway, Alter Rebbe says it's a mitzvah to start the meal before the 10th hour. In other words, those that are probably familiar, in Halacha, the hours of the day is split into 12 parts. So let's say on a day, in a perfect day that starts 6 and ends 6, you'll have each hour be 60 minutes. If let's say in such as Siman, let's say a Friday that begins 6 and ends 6, the mitzvah would be to start the meal before 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's the beginning of the 10th hour. It becomes 10 hours into the day, it's 4 o'clock. 3 o'clock is the beginning of the 10th hour. So it's a mitzvah to start the meal, l'chatchila. Obviously, if you didn't get a chance yet to start the meal, you should continue the meal. You should start the meal later, but you should try to get the meal going before the 10th hour, beginning of the 10th hour. Because from that time and on, it's a mitzvah to, even a sunnah, even a suda k'tana, even just a regular meal that you have, regular breakfast, lunch, supper that you have during the weekdays, it's a mitzvah to refrain from starting it from that point, from 3 hours, shoyz mani is 3 hours based on splitting up the day into 12 hours before the end of the day. So therefore, by Sudas Mitzvah, you should also at least try to start it before that Zman. And Alter Rebbe says, v'toiv, it's best that in such a meal you should only have, besides the relatives and thus that are invited to the meal, so you should have, besides them, only a minyan mitzumtzum, only exactly 10 other people that are not relatives that you have to invite, or let's say by a bris, so this moil, the sandik, and the father, they're all considered, and the relatives, they're all considered the people that are, part of the bris, and then besides them, you can have another minyan. So that's basically the thing. Now, this din would also obviously apply. Let's say in a case where you have either you have a regular case of 2 days Yom Tov. So if a person is eating his first meal in the Shachris, whatever time he's ready to hold, he's holding by eating the meal on the first day of Yom Tov, it would be best. Again, it's best to try to eat it before Shah Siris of the second night. Alter Rebbe doesn't write that here. Of course, can bring this down that it's best to eat it. If you didn't eat the meal, you have to wash it. It's Yom Tov, it's Shabbos, but you should try to eat it before Shah Siris. Or if Yom Tov is out of Shabbos, or out of Shabbos is out of Yom Tov, whichever way, you have a whole halacha of Shabbos later on, Shabbos out of Yom Tov. But speaks about But at any rate, but it's also kedai, even all these cases, it's Sudas Mitzvah, you have to eat the meal, but if it's shaykh to work out, you should try to at least start the meal before Shah Siris, before 3 hours before the end of the day. The same thing, any Suda, they write the mitzvahs, like certain people wash in Rish Chodesh. So it's brought down that those that are makbid to wash every Rish Chodesh on Friday, they should try, so if Rish Chodesh falls out on Friday, they should try to wash before Shah Siris. If not, so then it's whatever. Certain people consider that it's a Sudas Mitzvah, you could wash, up and even later on. The shaila would be, remember a few years ago, there's a shaila, Pesach Sheni was on Friday. So Pesach Sheni was on Friday, so we know there's different opinions when to eat the matzah. Some people say eat the matzah by day, some people say eat the matzah the night, not Yudalet, Pesach Sheni by day, but they eat the matzah Tetzvot. Eat the matzah by, the night after, because that's when they actually ate the korban Pesach and they had the Pesach Sheni. Maybe it's got in a shaila, if somebody didn't wash before Shah Siris, what is good? What is more important? The mitzvah of not to have a meal at that point, or to wash to have the matzah. So if you could only eat the matzah by Yudalet Pesach Sheni, obviously it would be Inyan Shizmana by Yom, you should wash to eat the matzah. But since there are those that eat the matzah Chatchila by night, So in a shtickle, there was one of, I believe, that Paskin that you shouldn't wash. Whatever, Kol Chad, everybody should speak to their local rabbi, everybody, different people, whatever. I mean, I believe the Rebbe writes it's best to eat matzah, sayudal, saytasva, whatever it might be. But anyway, that was another thing that came up that's negated this halacha. Purim clearly writes in the Ramah writes in Hilchos Purim, Siman Sadekei, I believe, that Purim that falls out on Friday, so the minhag is to have the meal on Friday. But there, anyway, I mean, there it's also mitzad this, but there also, I mean, you if you're going to start the meal later on and people get drunk and does, I mean, the meal of Purim B'chlal is a much more elaborate type of a meal than a regular Shabbos or Yom Tov. But there also, the Amos says, the attack you have it in the morning. If you didn't have it in the morning, you have to wash. So even if it's right before Shkia, whatever it is, you have a chiyuv to. There's a whole thing about Peres Mapa Mekadosh in these type of cases. Those that have the Purim meal later, and the Peres Mapa Mekadosh, it's not getting the whole issue of Peres Mapa Mekadosh. But if you take a Peres Mapa Mekadosh, so then Yishmokim Loimar. That the whole reason why you don't eat a meal after the Shah Asiris is in order you should eat the meal by night. You should have an appetite to eat the meal by night. If you're continuing the same meal, so you don't have that whole problem because you're washing then and you're continuing the meal. So it's within the same meal. You don't say that you're losing your appetite from the beginning to the end. So if you're going to have on a Friday, put them the falls out on Friday, and make a Peres Mapa Mekadosh. Besides the problems that could fall into those, if you put this map in Makadosh, etc. But inside this halacha, they write it won't be a problem because you're not going to lose your appetite as long as you're continuing the same meal. The Rebbe in Sif Ches goes on and says that Sudas Pidyon Haben, that Pidyon Haben that you do in its time, which is the 31st day from when he's born, has a din of a Sudas Smila, that in other words is considered the Sudah that has to be that day. He says, if for whatever reason you weren't able to do it on its right time, you shouldn't make the Pidyon Haben Erev Shabbos. What you should do is you should make the Pidyon Haben, but don't make a meal. That's what the Rebbe writes. Whatever people speak about this, whatever it might be. Some people. That was the Zman.
Yeah.
So if it's not in the Zman, so the Rebbe writes here that you should the Rebbe writes in parentheses you should do the Pidyon Haben without a Sudah Shom Mishteh. Some people want to say that Rebbe is saying v'lo yiftenu b'lo Sudah Shom Mishteh. That Rebbe is saying you shouldn't make the Pidyon Haben then, but do it at another after Shabbos, and you'll be able to have a Sudah. At any rate, Beizayif in Shia, it's not such a common. I mean, whatever. I mean, today you have people, unfortunately, didn't have a Pidyon Haben when they were younger. But anyway, he says so too. Let's say somebody that didn't chveis, he did a kiddushin before Erev Shabbos, and he didn't yet make the meal. So he already pushed off the meal, so you shouldn't make it an Erev Shabbos. He says, and Nisuin, the Rebbe says like this. You have this whole thing about making chasnas on Friday. B'chlal in Europe, it was a very common thing to make chasnas on Friday, because like this, instead of having to make a big meal for the chasna, then a big meal for Shabbos, so they made l'chatchila, they made the Friday night meal was the chasna meal. You have some people however, they make chasnas on Friday itself, and they have a meal then. So l'chayr, according to the Alter Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe clearly wrote earlier that it's sudas nisuin you can make on Friday, even though it doesn't have to be done that day. The Alter Rebbe holds that there's in of mitzad priya revi, you don't want to push it off. So that's considered the sudas mitzvah shizmana baybayim. All those other poskim that seem to be more machman, it's Alter Rebbe does seem to write clearly it's not a problem. Alter Rebbe says also another thing: if they made a chasana. The way at least the Kseiz HaShulchan, they made a chasna, but they didn't yet make the meal. They made the chasna and didn't yet make the meal for the chasna. So then you can make the meal on Shabbos, because the meal of in other words, the same as the concept of Sheva Brachos. The concept of Sheva Brachos means all 7 days you have a meal. But there's also, the Sheva Brachos is not such a strong chiyuv. The chiyuv is to have a meal for the actual chasna. So even if you didn't have a meal for the actual chasna, but that eating of having the meal extends throughout the 7 days of the chasna, from after the chasna, from the Sheva Brachos. So if you didn't have a meal during the chasna, so you could have the meal on Shabbos, even though the chasna on Friday, even though the chasna was before Friday. Exactly, if it's talking about in a case that's the 7th day is Friday or whatever it is, when the Kseiz HaShulchan speaks about, it's not exactly clear. The Alter Rebbe is talking when the chasna was. Alter Rebbe is saying that any time the chasna was, Fridays within the 7 days, you make it, or only if it's the last day to make the meal. B'cholef in Shia. Anyway, in Sif Tes, the Alter Rebbe writes that a su'udah that you usually make during the weekdays, in other words, a regular meal, nishkein, you're washing, whatever it is, it says, min hadin, mikar hadin, you're allowed to eat it the whole day, even right before Bein HaShmoshes. He says it's a mitzvah lihimona, it's a mitzvah to try to hold yourself back from having it after the beginning of the 10th hour, in order that you should have an appetite for the Shabbos meal. But he says to eat and to drink without a kviyas su'udah, like the way Tzais HaShulchan explains, like eating fruits or drinking drinks that are not mishaker, that are not intoxicating, things like that. You could drink whatever you want until Bein HaShmoshes, until Shkia. You could eat and drink that because from when Shkia comes after Chiv of Kiddush. But he said the same thing. Says the Shulchan says mezainas, eating mezainas more than a kabei would also be a problem. Drinking mashka and things like that more than a kabei would also be a problem. Was these things in Allah are considered the kviyas suda. So again, it's not an isur. The Rebbe says further clearly, it's not an isur gomer. It's only a mitzvah, whatever it is. Nevertheless, it's so people come back from Mitzrayim on Friday afternoon and they're hungry. So I mean, obviously, even if you have to eat, you should try not to eat mezainis more than this year, whatever it is. But it's brought down that even if you're eating other things, you should at least try not to fill yourself up. At least if you're hungry, you have to eat, fine. No chiyuv to stop, but at least it's not brought down in Shulchan Aruch. But even if you're eating stuff like other stuff, but don't fill yourself up, in order that when Shabbos comes, you should still have appetite for the meal. We'll stop here. We'll continue next week. Oh yeah.